Hi, and welcome to How to Create Pinterest Graphics That Convert. My name is Kate, and I'm a Pinterest manager and marketing strategist. And in this class, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know to create beautiful, high-converting Pinterest graphics. Good Pinterest graphics are an essential to a solid Pinterest marketing strategy because your graphics are what people see in their feed. And if you have a good graphic, then you're going to be able to convert people from Pinterest to click through to your website to see your offerings. So in this class, we're going to walk through the 6 essential elements for creating a high converting Pinterest graphic. I'm going to show you how to do market research and see which type of pins do best in your niche. I'm going to share my favorite resources for finding beautiful stock photography to use for your Pinterest graphics. And then we're going to hop into Canva, and I'm going to show you step-by-step how to create your graphics. At the end, you'll feel fully confident to go forward and create your own high-converting Pinterest graphics. And at the end of the class, we'll have a homework session where you can submit your own pin designs and ask any questions you have for me in the group. So if you're ready, let's jump into the class. So before we jump into making the graphics themselves, I want to go through the 6 essential elements for a strong Pinterest graphic. So I'm going to go through them quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about them, and then we'll hop into Canva and I'll show you how these look in action. So the 6 essential elements are using proper pin dimensions, using your brand elements, using great imagery, having a catchy headline, using a strong call to action, and making sure that your pin graphic is super clear on what your audience is going to get when they click through to the pin. So the first one, pin dimensions. The ideal pin dimension is a 2:3 ratio. So that's 1000 by 1500 pixels. And this is your standard pin graphic. There are 2 other sizes that we'll talk about when we're in Canva, but the basic 2:3 ratio is going to be what you generally go with. Next is using your brand elements. And by this, I mean using your brand colors, your brand font, either your logo or your URL, and having a consistent aesthetic. So when you're doing this, then you're helping to build brand awareness because after a while, people will start to recognize your pins by your font, your colors, your overall aesthetic, and they'll recognize the pin as yours. So this is great for building brand awareness. And for example, when I'm scrolling through and I recognize someone's pin, if I know that I liked their content in the past, I'm more likely to click on theirs. Next is using great imagery. Not all pins need images. You can do some, especially for service-based providers with just text, but the majority of pins are going to use imagery. You can take your own if you are, say, a photographer or you are doing product imagery, like if you're an e-commerce brand. But if you don't take your own photos, then using stock imagery is a great option. And in another video, I'm going to show you my favorite resources for really great high quality stock photos. Next, you're going to want to use a catchy headline. So this is something that's going to grab your audience's attention. If you're a blogger, you're probably already familiar with the elements that make a good headline. And this is something like the ultimate guide to, or 7 essential steps to, or the must see spots in a location like Greece. So it's something that you're grabbing someone's attention and making them want to click through. Next is having a strong call to action. This isn't something I use on every single pin, but it's really great for prompting people to take the next action. For example, if you're promoting a freebie, you might say something like download now or grab your free copy. Or if you have a blog post, you might say something like learn more or read now. If you are promoting products, you might have something like shop now or check out the collection. So it's something to prompt people to take that next step. And finally, you just want to make sure overall that it's super clear what your pin is about. So if you're misleading with your pin, you're unclear, first of all, people might not want to click through, or if they do click through and find out the landing page is a lot different than the pin, they're going to instantly click out of it and you're not going to get that conversion. So you really want to let people know right off the bat what they're going to be getting if they click through. So now that we've covered our 6 essentials, let's hop into Canva and I'll show you how this looks on a couple of different pins. Okay, so now we're in Canva and I'm just going to show you how all of these elements come together. So over here, if I click on the colors here, because I have a Canva Pro, I'm able to save all of my brand colors right here. If you don't have Canva Pro, you can just go to Document Colors and put in your hex code and it'll pull your color up for you. So on this graphic, I have chosen my brand colors. I have my URL here in my font, and this is the other font that I use on my blog. So I've got my colors, I've got my font, I've got my URL, and this is the kind of imagery that I typically use on my pin graphics. So something bright, colorful, minimalist, and kind of like a millennial look. And then I've got my headline here. So I have how to create your pin graphics that convert. And like we talked about, that convert here is enticing people to click through because they want graphics that actually convert and are going to be beneficial to them. Then for a call to action, what I've done here is on the blog. So this isn't a direct call to action, but it's letting people know that this is a blog post. So that's what they're going to be clicking over to see. And then all of this comes together to really accurately show people what they're going to be getting. So they know that they're going to be, if they click through, they are going to be going to KH Socials and they are going to see a blog post explaining how to create pin graphics that convert. Here we have another example that I pulled up. So we have the same elements. I've got my brand colors, my brand fonts, I've got my URL. And again, it's the kind of color palette that I typically use, like neutrals, minimal images. And I did this one just to show you that your image doesn't always have to be exactly what it's about. So this one here showed a woman at a computer, maybe making Pinterest graphics. Here I don't have that, but it's in kind of an aesthetic vibe that I think would catch the eye of people, my audience. So that's people in the wellness and lifestyle niches. That's who I typically work with, or creative entrepreneurs. And then again, it's very clear what people are getting. So they're going to be going to khsocials.com and they are going to be learning how to create Pinterest graphics that convert, and they're going to be able to read more about that. So that is one example of how all of these elements can come together to create highly converting Pinterest graphics. Now next, I just want to take a look at the 2 other pin styles that I talked about. So here you can do a basic square pin. I find that this typically works best if you aren't writing text. So this can work well if you are, say, like a travel blogger and you're sharing photography, if you're a photographer and you want to share some of your work, or if you, say, are an e-commerce brand, you want to show some product imagery. It's just an example that you can play around with. You could also add a little bit of text like your URL here. And this is just something, maybe you add in a few square pins with just an image and maybe a simple URL or logo, and just see how they do. Sometimes I do find that square images tend to work really well. So it's just an option that you can play around with. And the one other size here is a longer shape. So if you go to resize here, it shows you the dimensions. So this one is 1000 by 2100. And I find that this can work well because it is bigger. It will stand out from the sea of other pins. And I find that this can work really well for things like listicles. Like here I have 5 ways to practice self-care at home. And then I have a few different self-care images. This doesn't need to be the style of your longer pin. It doesn't need to be like this collage of photos, but this is just an example that can work really well. So yeah, you can try playing around with a couple of these longer 1000 by 2100 images and see how they work. And again, yeah, if you're in Canva, you can double check the size here by clicking on resize. And you can see this one here, our standard pin is 1000 by 1500. So here are the 3 different sizes that I would recommend playing around with, focusing primarily on the 2x3. So as I mentioned, good imagery is one of the essentials of a good pin graphic design. Now, if you are, say, a blogger, a photographer, or you have an e-commerce shop and have your own product photography, you likely already have all of your own images and you won't need to use stock images. But if you don't take your own photography, then stock sites can be really helpful for getting really beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and on-brand images for your pin graphics. There are some exceptions. Not all pin graphics need images. Some work really great with just having text overlay, or maybe you're making an infographic. But for the majority of pins, imagery is a really key component. So there are some really amazing stock photography sites, and there are some not so great ones. So I'm going to walk you through my favorite sites to use. Some are paid and some are free, so you can choose the option that's right for you. And one more thing I want to note is that you should be looking for imagery that suits your brand aesthetic. So if you are a really colorful and vibrant brand, look for images that match that. If you're more of like a moody or a neutral aesthetic, then look for images that suit that brand. Choosing images that are on brand for you is going to help to build that brand awareness, and it will help to attract your ideal audience who matches your similar aesthetic and vibe. All right, so let's take a look at my favorite stock photography sites. Okay, so I just pulled up a blog post here that I did, so you can reference back to this if you want for links. So on khsocials.com, I have a blog post on 7 gorgeous stock photo sites for creative entrepreneurs. So you can always go back to this if you want links, but I'm going to take you through them now. So Pexels is one of my favorite, pexels.com. They have tons and tons of beautiful, completely free imagery. And they also have videos, which is great if you want to play around with some video pin options. You can go in, I like to go in, especially when I get a new client, I will go in and just save a bunch of images. So you can save them here and save a bunch that I think might fit their brand. Next up is Unsplash. This is actually a bigger library, and there is a lot of overlap between them and Pexels. And I really love their imagery as well. And just like Pexels, you're able to save these to your own library, so you can go back and get them. Next up is Hotestock. So this is a paid membership site. You pay monthly, but they have really, really gorgeous imagery. This is probably my favorite of all the paid stock photography that I found. I was a member and I got a ton of the images for my website and for my marketing materials and my pin graphics. They also have some free stock photos you can download and tutorials and blog posts. Next up, another really popular stock photography site is Moyo Studio. Rather than being a membership site, you can buy photo packages. And they also have a lot of mock-up imagery, which is great if you are like a graphic designer, brand designer, or want anything that requires mock-ups. This is a great source for that. Next up is Color Joy Stock, and they have a really beautiful imagery. They also focus on diverse stock imagery, which is really amazing. So this is another great source. And they also, I'm not sure where it is on their site, but they also have like a little freebie, so you can get a few free images. Next is Creative Market. I use Creative Market for everything. You can find font on here. We're going to talk about buying Pinterest graphic templates on here after, but they also have a lot of photos, and they, like Moyo, sell more photo packs than membership. So it's a good option if you know like a specific aesthetic that you want, and you can just buy a one-off. Next up, back to Canva. Oh, I'm gonna have to go home here. So back to Canva, they have a ton of free photos. So if you go into photos, you can search on tons of different topics. They have a ton of free options. You can see free here in the corner. And they also have other photography for if you're on their pro plan. And then I go through it. Anytime I see an image I like, I save it. And then it goes into my favorited section. It's called Starred. So they actually have a ton on here too. And if you use Canva, you can connect Pexels, the first site we talked about, and you'll be able to access Pexels directly from Canva, which can be a big time saver. And lastly, we have Styled Stock. I've used them as well. Again, they're a free membership program, or not free, sorry, they're a paid membership program. They do have a couple freebies you can download, and this would be a membership where you get ongoing images. So this is a good option if you want, like this in Hootstock is a good option if you want really high quality images and you know you're going to be needing a lot on a regular basis. A membership program can be a good way to go. So those are my favorite places to find stock photography. And again, you can get a recap of this on my blog, cagesocials.com. Okay, so we have one more topic to cover before we jump into our pin design, and that is doing market research on your pin designs. So this isn't about copying other creators' graphics, but it's about understanding what type of graphics work in your niche. So there's really a pretty wide variety of pin graphic styles that work depending on your niche. So you just want to hop in and see what kind of pins are ranking high, which means they're resonating with your ideal audience. So we're going to jump into Pinterest now, and I am going to show you how to search for pin graphics in different niches to understand what kind of styles you should be playing around with. Okay, so here we are in my business Pinterest account, and I'm going to start off by doing a search for Instagram marketing. And we'll see, so if there's any marketing people out here, which I'm sure there are, we'll see the kind of things that do well in marketing. So as you can see, almost every graphic here is some type of infographic or list. And these tend to do really, really well for marketing or any kind of educational type of pin. Here's one of my pins right here, and you can see that it is a list. So this is something to keep in mind if you're doing any kind of marketing or educational type of pin graphic, that actually listing things out or creating like infographic listicles can do really well. As we scroll down here, you can see that this one is more like the standard pin graphic that we talked about before, so these can work as well. But you can consider adding in a few more infographic-y type posts if that's your niche. Keep in mind too, if you see promoted by, these are not going to be pin types you want to really take into consideration because they're promoted, so they're not organically showing up. Like they're not an accurate representation. So next, let's take a look at travel. So we'll do Greece travel as an example. And you can see that the style of the pin is completely different. So we have a lot of pins that are just imagery. Like we talked about how this can work well for travel. None of these are really square. There's a smaller one here, but plain imagery can work really well for travel or certain niches. You just want to make sure that your caption is really clear on what people are clicking through. If you just say like Greece travel here, people aren't going to know that they're actually going to get a blog post. So if you are testing out image only, make sure that your caption's really strong. And other than that, the general vibe I'm seeing is like really bright, beautiful travel photography with fairly simple headlines. Again, lots of photography. I think for travel, doing little collages can work really well. And yeah, just scrolling through. So it's a lot of the same. So bright, beautiful colors, short, clear headlines. Here we have the website, which is good. Yeah, so that is another example. Now let's take a look at product photography. So I'm going to search gold necklaces. And you can see here, as this is a product, we're getting a lot more just still product imagery. You'll notice some of the promoted pins have the logo on them, which is to build brand awareness while they're promoting themselves. But a lot of them here are just static images. So a lot of the things that we're talking about in this course don't apply as much to product imagery. But this is still, it's good to check out to see what works in your niche. If you're doing products, but they're more digital imagery, then you will want the more standard graphics that we're talking about. And finally, let's take a look at an example of a recipe post. So we'll do espresso martinis because I'm loving those right now. And then here you can see that we're getting, nice product image or nice photography of the recipe itself. We have clear headlines on what it's about. So this one's a great example. So we have a really pretty image. We have a headline. We have their URL, and I'm sure this is their brand font and colors. So this one actually I have made before because this image stood out to me. And as we scroll through, so it focused on the food itself with pretty clear headlines. So those are just a few examples of different niches. So you can do your market research right on Pinterest to see what types of pins work well in your niche. Okay, so now we're finally ready to go into Canva and start making our graphics. One thing I want to mention before we get in is that there are two different ways to make your pins. The first is to completely start from scratch, and this gives you complete control over the design of your pin. But if this isn't of interest to you or you're not really design inclined, then you can start with a template. Canva offers a ton of template options, both with their free and paid upgrade options. And you can also use Creative Market, which we talked about before. They have tons of Pinterest graphics available there. Or you can go to Etsy. They also sell a lot of Pinterest graphics. So you can look for a style that suits your brand, and that's more of a plug and play option. Both can be made in Canva, or you can take your templates into Canva and edit them, or you can start from scratch in Canva. So everything is done in Canva. And one more thing I want to mention is that you want to make around 7 to 10 Pinterest graphic templates, whether you're buying them or starting from scratch, because this gives you options to try different pin graphics and see what resonates best with your audience. And it also gives you options to create more pin content per piece of blog content or landing pages that you have. So now let's jump into Canva and get started creating our pin designs. Okay, so here we are in Canva, and we're going to go to create a design, and you can see here there's a Pinterest pin, so you can just click on that to get started. If you want to try different dimensions, like one of the longer ones or the square we talked about, you can click here on custom size and type that in. But I'm going to go with a regular Pinterest pin for now. And here we have our completely blank template. If you want to use one of Pinterest's pin designs, you can click on templates here, and they have a ton of different designs that you can use. So you can see here that there's some that I have recently used, so they're saved up here. Then there's a For You section where they suggest styles that they think you'd like. There's video pin options. There's options for, say, food bloggers, wedding professionals, all kinds of different templates. So you can scroll through and see an option that you might like to use with. There are some that are free, or there are some you can see if it's pro, that means you have to have the paid upgrade. So if you want to use one, just click on it, and then you can customize anything you want. So we could say, how to create pin graphics. Oh, that's not working. So you can say how to create pin graphics, and you can customize anything you want. But for this example, I am going to start from scratch. So we'll start with this blank template here. First thing I'm going to do is choose a background color. And again, I have all of my brand colors saved here. So maybe we'll start off with this color. And then I want to add an image. So you can go into Canva and use any of their photos. Like I showed you before, all of my saved images that I like are in the starred section. I've also saved pin templates that I like, Instagram templates that I like, different things like that. So let's use this image here. Oh, I'll mention that you can also upload your own images. So that's an option as well. But we are going to use this one here as an example. If you hover over, it's going to drop it to fill the whole space, or you can click it like this. From here, you can use these to change the size of your image, but I kind of like the image that it showed up in. So next up, I'm going to add my text. So I'm going to go to the text button here. And I have my different text saved here. This is what I generally use for my headlines. So I'm going to click this one, take this arrow and move it up. And then I'm going to make my headline, how to create pin graphics that convert. Now I want to make this quite a bit bigger, so I will play around with the text here. Let's see how 64 looks. It looks pretty good. I'm going to drag this bar in so that it's nice because Canva kind of gives you these guidelines to help you see like if your text is centerized, where it falls. So I think that looks pretty good. And instead of using this here, you can also toggle up or down, but I kind of liked it at 64. So now we have our headline, we have our image, we have our brand elements, and now I'm going to add my URL. So I'm going to click my subheading here because this is my logo font. Make it a little bigger, and I'll put in khsocials.com. I'm going to grab this, move it down here, make sure it's centerized. And then I'm going to add my kind of like pseudo call to action. So I'm clicking here, and then here is where you can change all of your font. So I am looking for Gabrielle Sands because that's what I like to use for this little subtext. And I'm going to say on the blog. I'll make that a little smaller, move it up here. And then you can do a lot of stuff with your font up here. So I could make this bold, italics, I can, put it off to the side, kind of like anything you do in Word. You can change the color of it here. And then you can change the spacing. So this can be a nice little touch if you want to change your letter spacing. You drag this here. You can see how it stretches it out. And then this one's only one line, so I won't show you on this one, but if you go here, you can change the line spacing. So that's just something you can play around with, kind of like a style choice. And now I'm going to go here into Elements. So Elements has a ton of different, you can do lines and shapes, you can do graphics. It has just a lot of different things that you can use in your pin. So I am going to go to See All for Lines and Shapes, and I'm going to grab this line here. So I just clicked it. I'm going to rotate it, make sure it's straight. It can be a little tricky to get it perfectly straight. For now, I'll just say that's good, but I'd play around with it if I was doing this on my own. And I want to bring it up to the top. And, oh, there we go. And now I'm going to shorten it. And I want it to be this color. So you can just add little elements like this to your pin. You can add different shapes. So I like to use this one. Sometimes I'll drag a square here. Drag a square. And then I will use it like this at the bottom. And then I have somewhere that I can kind of like highlight my logo. So that's an option. There's lots of different things you can do with these elements. Another thing that you can use is these frames. So this is a frame for a photo to put in. So say if I want a square or a circular photo, I'll delete this one. And then I will drop this frame in here. Make sure it's center. And then I'm going to go back to my photos. And I can drop this into the circle. So it just gives you some options for different image shapes. There's a ton of different things in Elements. And if you want, like if you have a certain aesthetic in mind, you can search for things like, let's look at boho. And then it will give you cool little boho elements to use. So maybe you want some dots, for example, just something to catch people's eye. So there's lots of different things like that that you can scroll around and find. And if you find one you really like, then you go here and you star it. And then it's going to go into your starred section. You can do this for templates, for images, for graphics, pretty much any type of thing in here in Canva. You can star and save it, and it's going to go into your starred folder. I also like it because it gives you some keywording that this is indexed under. So maybe you're like, okay, now I want to look for more palm trees. So you can click on palm tree, and it will show you all of the palm tree options. So that's something fun to play around with. Another thing that can be super helpful is you click on an image, and say if you want these dots to be behind this photo, you'll right click and you will click send backward. And now it's behind this. You don't want to say send to back because then it's going to go behind all of your elements. This is the only element right now, so it's just going behind that, but it will set it to the very back of all the elements, say if things are layered together. So it's easier to go send backwards and then keep doing it until it's in the place that you want. So that is a look at how to use Pinterest to create your graphics. There's a ton that you can learn about Canva. This is obviously just a very basic. Canva has they have a lot of resources so you can learn how to do more in-depth design, but this is a basic rundown on how to create your Pinterest pins. When you are ready to download, I ignore this publish to Pinterest because that's using Canva to schedule, and I don't like using Canva to schedule. I prefer Tailwind or Pinterest itself. So you're going to go in here, you're going to hit download, and then you're going to choose the file type you want. For images, I always use PNG. If I am doing a video pin, then I'm going to go to MP4 video. And then you're going to choose which pages you want. So right now we have 2 pages here. We have this template we use and the one we just created. I only want the second one, so I am going to click page 2, done, download, and then your pin is going to download. And now I just want to quickly show you my own Pinterest graphics. So like I mentioned, it's a good idea to have more than one graphic. I recommend between 7 to 10 for each piece of content. So I have all of these different styles that I've created So when I create a blog post, I will make a bunch of different pin graphics to promote that one blog post. So I like to have more than I'm going to use, and then I can choose a few styles to use for each piece of content. And then over here, you'll see I make a ton because I just like options. And then I have some that are specific for my freebies. So you can see my call to action, download now. I'm using my brand colors. I have my catchy headline. I'm letting people know that they're going to get a free guide. And then I have a few different ways to promote that. So yeah, just keep in mind that you definitely don't need as many as I have, but you want to create different options that you can play around with. So that is your Canva pin graphic tutorial. So before we wrap up, there is one more topic that I want to go over with you, and that is measuring the results of your pin graphics. So as we talked about in the last video, you want to be making multiple pin graphics per piece of content, and this is going to allow you to measure how different pin graphics are resonating with your audience. So there are a few different factors that go into how your pin ranks, and these include your keywording, the topic that you're covering, and your pin graphics themselves. So after a few months of pinning, go into your analytics and take a look and see if there's any patterns on which pin graphics seem to be getting the most attention. So you might notice that there's a certain style that seems to really be resonating with your audience, and it's getting more results than other styles. If you see a style that's working really well, make sure to continue using that and see if you can create some variations to create other pin templates that you can create in this similar style. If there's a style that's consistently not ranking well, then maybe you consider getting rid of that one or replacing it with a different pin template. So how you measure the health of your pin graphics is primarily looking at the saves and the outbound clicks that they get. You don't want to so much focus on impressions because impressions are more likely due to solid keywording. So for example, if a pin graphic is getting a ton of impressions but very little saves or outbound clicks, this could mean that you're doing great on your keywording, Pinterest understands what the pin's about and it's showing it to people who are searching for your topic, but there just isn't something that's catching your audience's eye and making them want to save it or click through to your website. On the other hand, if you see a pin graphic style that's consistently getting a lot of saves and outbound clicks, there's a good chance that this pin style is really resonating with your audience, it's eye-catching, and it's a style that you want to continue using moving forward. So you don't want to check this right away because Pinterest is a slower moving platform, so you need a good solid 3 months of consistent pinning to really start to see any patterns emerge. So give it some time, and then a few months down the road, hop into your analytics and see if you can check any patterns that are emerging about your pin design. And that's our class. By now, you should be feeling ready and confident to get into Canva and start creating your own beautiful, high-converting Pinterest graphics.